It's not right. Just saying.
Good evening. It is now 6:30, and I will call the Monday, May 22nd, 2017 Burnsville Planning Commission to order. Commissioners, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate everyone, and staff, thank you very much. Our first item this evening is the adoption of this evening's agenda. Commissioners, do you have any changes or concerns with tonight's agenda? None from commissioners, staff, any changes to tonight's agenda?
No changes.
No changes. With that being said, commissioners, I would stand for a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Levy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay, and the motion carries. That takes us to the second item on our agenda this evening, which is the approval of the minutes for May 8th, 2017. Commissioners, do you have any changes to the posted minutes in our background? Staff?
No changes.
I hear no changes from the commission or staff. I would also stand for a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Commissioner Singh,
Second.
second by Commissioner Workman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay, and the motion carries. That does bring us to the third item on our agenda this evening, and this is a public hearing. It's an application of Kraus Anderson Incorporated for a conditional use permit amendment to allow a religious assembly in a building located at 609 Travelers Trail West. And Ms. Dean is our presenter this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. This is a conditional use permit request for within an existing building. The space that the tenant is proposing to occupy is within Gateway Industrial Complex. There's multiple parcels as part of this overall complex. However, they're proposing to occupy about 10,000 square feet of space. The applicant is Gateway Church. It's a religious institution. And again, they are proposing just to use one leasable tenant space of that one of the buildings. The location, it is within our Heart of the City zoning district, Heart of the City 2 specifically, where we do allow a religious institution with a conditional use permit approval. It is also surrounded by 35W to the west and Highway 13 to the north. This gives you an overall perspective of the specific site. The Gateway Church would be located approximately in this area of the building. The tenant mix within all three buildings consists of office, some warehouse space. There is a tenant that is also a religious institution. A few years ago, they did receive a conditional use permit approval for their specific use. So just taking it out, getting a better perspective of the overall surrounding area. Again, there's three parcels that are that occupy or that have buildings occupied within the site, and then there's also an outlot located here where there is parking, and then the overall approval. This was approved in the late 80s, and the buildings built subsequently after. On the north part, it also expands further to the south where some development hasn't occurred. I should step back again. The site was originally zoned B3 as part of a plan unit development in the late 90s when Heart of the City was being reviewed, and eventually Heart of the City zoning was adopted for the site, as well as the land use associated with it was the property was guided Heart of the City. There is a private shared parking. One of the requests from city staff that's added as a condition is that there's proof of the cross parking availability recorded on the property. That was unclear, and so we want to make sure that it's not just within a lease agreement, that it's not an informal handshake between the properties should they turn over at some point in the future, that's actually established and recorded. So that is added as a condition. Overall, between the 3 parcels with buildings as well as the outlot. There's almost 700 parking spaces. Gateway Church is I would consider an off-peak use from a majority of the tenants within the buildings. A lot of office-type users with the Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 type of schedule. Gateway Church primarily would occupy the site on the weekends, as well as some office hours for administrative staff, but mainly evening or weekend hours. This just gives you an overall layout of their proposed floor plan, some office space as well as classroom, prayer rooms, general seating for their worship services, and just general congregation of their members. According to their narrative, approximately 45 members are part of the Gateway Church at this point. They did show how they could grow within the space, and that's what you're seeing, kind of maxed out to the full occupancy potential. This plan just, again, kind of gives you an overview of the parking layout for the 3 sites, the 3 buildings. And again, overall, there's approximately 700 parking spaces. Gateway 1 is where the general location of where the church will be located, has the cross parking pretty easily accessible in this portion of the 2 sites. Staff does recommend approval of the conditional use permit request. I should mention that there's no changes to the exterior of the building. There may be a minor change that's required due to fire code and exiting requirements, but it should not affect the overall look of the building. It would just be a door added. The site circulation would stay the same, the landscaping would stay the same. Religious institutions are conditional use permit approval within this area. The application does satisfy the required parking. There's no deviations or variances as part of the request. In the heart of the city, we do allow for shared and joint parking opportunities. It's a little different than the general section of the city code where it's basically encouraged to have less parking and shared parking opportunities. And again, staff does recommend approval of the proposed conditional use permit for the religious assembly or religious institution. We do recommend that all previous conditional use permits and PUDs, that those remain in full force and effect. There was a conceptual site plan that was provided as part of the packet or part of the submittal to city staff. They will require a separate sign permit for that. It would be a separate application. And city staff wants to ensure that that cross access is recorded with the property. And so we want to make sure that that's provided prior to issuance of any building permits for any tenant improvements for that specific space. So, with that, the applicant or the Gateway Church representatives are here if you have any questions, and I'd be more than happy to stand for any questions that you might have as well.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. I appreciate all your background information.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, questions for Ms. Dean? Commissioner Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The outlot parking, outlot 8, I'm not clear where that parking is.
So there's approximately 12 spaces.
Okay.
There is driveway access here and here. There's also access to the outlot parking. It's kind of a common drive that goes through in between the parcels, the pond, and in between the area to the south. So it's across the street, but it is accessible and in fairly close proximity to the Gateway leasable space.
Thank you.
Commissioner, any other questions? Commissioner Levy? Commissioner Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Dean, you mentioned that there may be one door exterior work to be done. What about internally?
Internally, there are some modifications that will need to be made to meet fire and building code requirements. They have had early talks with our building official and with our fire marshal to see what would be required. And they do have a contractor and architect on board. They've been great to work with and been provided, they have provided information on how the space would be configured.
Commissioner.
One other question, parking, where will the parking for disability parking will be located?
That is a ADA, American Disabilities Act requirement that our building official will review. Typically, it's in close proximity to the front entry. And again, it's something that is required, will be reviewed, will be established, and likely will be near the front door. And the contractor may be able to answer more questions specific to that. I know he's in the audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioners, other questions? Hearing none, okay. Commissioners, would you like to have would you have questions for the applicant?
I guess
Commissioner Workman.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this should be geared toward the applicant or not, but I believe in the letter it said that there's 45 members in the church with intent to grow. Do we know what the occupancy is of this space, the total occupancy?
Let's see if I have that in my notes. I can say that the parking required based off of the max occupancy as provided would be 186 stalls. Let me look at the plan. 557.
Christine, why don't I have the applicant come up and address Commissioner Workman's question? Is that,
That would be
why don't you step up and,
great.
why don't you step up there and give us your name and your business address for the
Yeah.
record?
My name is Peter Hill. I'm an architect registered in the state of Minnesota, and my business address is 13212 McGinty Road, Minnetonka, Minnesota. And I have worked with city staff to establish that the occupancy for all building purposes of this particular development is 557. So that's the occupancy that we're using to establish egress requirements, to establish plumbing fixture requirements, and so on. It's not specifically the occupancy that we're using to establish parking. To establish parking, we went through the Burnsville zoning code and identified the parking requirements as identified in the zoning code.
Thank you for that. My main question was, if the church continues to grow, I didn't realize how much room was in that space until I saw this, because I drove by there and it looks like a fairly modest size space. So as you continue to grow, I guess my only concern is this the parking and the facility going to be?
We will have fixed seating in the sanctuary space of approximately 200 seats.
Okay.
And so I think as a pragmatic matter, that's probably pretty close to the maximum real occupancy of the space. We have to calculate essentially the maximum for all the different spaces at the same time to get to our 557. But realistically, in terms of a Sunday service, it's probably 200 people.
And then typically from Monday through Friday, when the other businesses are operating, what would you expect?
Fewer than 20.
Fewer than 20. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioners, other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, this is a public hearing, so at this point, I would like to open the public hearing and invite anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item to step up to the podium and give us your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak to this item, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, your pleasure, discussion.
Mr. Chair, I think we have exhausted the questions.
Okay.
It's a very straightforward application. They have met all the requirements. I'll be happy to move a motion.
I
on
would
this matter.
appreciate that, Commissioner Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I beg to move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the conditional use permit to allow religious assembly within the existing building located at 603 West Travelers Trail, Burnsville, with the 3 conditions submitted by staff.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Singh and a second by Commissioner Walter. It is 609 Travelers Trail to be specific, but all in, 609 Travelers Trail West, just for the record. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. This will go in front of the City Council on June 6th, so thanks for coming in this evening. We appreciate your time. Have a safe drive back home. Thank you. That brings us to the 4th item on our agenda this evening, and this is also a public hearing. It's an application of Wells Federal Bank for a planned unit development amendment to change building use, land use, and parking arrangement within Early Lake Office Park. The subject site is located in the southwest intersection of County Road 5 and South Cross Drive West. Our presenter this evening is Ms. Garros. Thank you.
Oops, I grabbed the wrong thing.
And as Ms. Garros is grabbing the other paperwork, we will move forward with this presentation.
I know this project well, but not that well. Commissioners and folks in the audience, the application this evening is really something that the applicant, the association, if you will, and staff have been working on for many, many years. And the subject site is a planned unit development. It consists of 6 different lots, 2 different phases of the development. And I just want to call your attention to that because phase 2, when that was developed, really just added this northwesterly portion of the site to the Early Lake Office Park development. This building is different than all of the other buildings. This building was approved as a 2-unit town office building, and has a different layout that was approved for that than the rest of the buildings within the development. The applicant is looking to have a PUD amendment primarily to change the use of some of the permitted uses within the project site, which will allow them to complete the project and be able to market it and finally have a complete viable site. What they are looking at is primarily number 1 in the center part. Here is where Lot 5, Block 1 of Early Lake Office Park is platted. This is supposed to be, the use that was approved with the PUD back in 2006 and 7 is for another 4-unit town office building, very similar to the other 4 that were approved along South Cross Drive and along County Road 5. What they would like to do is to change the use of that site to remove the office building and to change it to association common open space, if you will, or common space within the association. The other thing that they would like to do is within the buildings, when the original PUD was approved, they were approved to be, each building was to have 4 different tenant spaces, if you will, consisting of a lower floor, the main floor, and then a third floor. The third floors were established in the PUD plans to be for mechanical and storage space, not to be occupied space. So what they are requesting is to be able to approve that third floor to remove the mechanical storage use only and allow it to be occupied and used for office purposes. What basically has happened over the years is the project started out with a developer. It's changed hands a couple of times. The developer that took over the project was also a builder, and that was Titus Construction, Inc. And they started developing the project and building the buildings. Various units were finalized over the years and purchased, sold, etc. However, in that interim period, the owner died. And with that, basically this last Lot 5 has been kind of sitting out there waiting, where no one really knew the ownership of the property or could finalize it. So the association and staff have been working together for years trying to resolve how can we allow for the use of the third floors, if you will, to be occupied, but yet have this outstanding situation where a future building could be constructed there. The PUD, when it was approved based on parking calculations for the 2 floors of office space. If you add the third floor of office space in there, that kicks up the amount of parking, and there's only so much parking that can be provided on the site. There are currently 193 spaces, and the PUD was granted flexibility to give them a lesser number of parking spaces than the ordinance required at the time. What's also happened within that time period is that the ordinance has been amended, and we changed the parking standards, which is actually positive for the project and for this development. At this point, the association has been able to purchase Lot 5, and they have come in and they are requesting this amendment. And what will happen is, if that building goes away, which is supported by staff to change that land use, then you don't have to reserve parking spaces, if you will, for a future building that could be built there at some point in time. And instead, the third floors of those buildings can be occupied. And what actually comes out when this all kind of comes out in the wash is that with Lot 5, the use being changed to remove that building, and then if we allow the third floors that are existing out there to be occupied, their parking ratio per the ordinance today is a minimum of 187 parking stalls to a maximum of 205 parking stalls, and they have an under 193. So they meet the ordinance, which is a great thing. The PUD, a number of benefits from a city standpoint, but really, I think finally, this could be something where the owners within the development would be able to use their spaces as they want to. They're condoed, so they can sell units, which have been kind of not been able to do so over the years just because of this unknown with this Lot 5. So that would be taken care of. And the benefits in terms of the PUD is that we actually have less impervious surface. It's reduced from 46 to 43%, which is positive from a city PUD standpoint. Overall site green space is increased from 54 to 57%. Green space within the parking lot is also increased from 10 to 11%, which is a good thing. And the site parking actually meets the ordinance. So with that, the recommendation from staff is we're recommending approval of the PUD amendment as requested by the applicant, subject to 2 conditions. One, that all previous planned unit development and CUP standards remain in full force and effect, with the exception of the changes in land use for Lot 5 and then allowing those third floors to be occupied. And then number 2, that for the third floor conversions, they are subject to obtaining a building permit and need to meet building and fire codes. With that, we have two Mr. Brandts, Mike Brandt and Ray Brandt are here. And this is a public hearing, and I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. I appreciate staff's work on this. I know this has been a long, arduous process to get this kind of cleaned up. Just a couple quick questions.
Certainly.
If I looked in the background, the building in phase 2, or is it the second phase that was added on to, the plans for that building actually showed usable space on the third floor, where the
Yes.
other two, where lot 1, 2, 3, and 4 did not show
That's
usable
correct.
space.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
the building in lot 2 currently today has occupied space on the third floor.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Yep. That's why in the PUD amendment, we really addressed for the third floor occupancies that those relate to lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as
Okay.
opposed to lot 6 is the 2-unit, because that one has a different set of floor plans and already as you say, the third floors are occupied.
Occupied, okay. Because I remember when this was developed, that was kind of added at the last
Yes.
minute, and they purchased that property from the townhome development to put that building there.
Exactly. Yep.
And does this, hopefully this will fix the kind of restraint they have today with some temporary certificates of occupancy?
Yes, actually, the units have been issued their final certificates of occupancy, but because the third floor and the use issue hadn't been dealt with, there is a restriction on those that the third floors still need to be used for mechanical office until this PUD amendment is approved, should it be approved.
So I have one more question, sorry. So
Mm-hmm. okay.
going forward, it's a pretty simple, today, everybody has a permanent CO, except if they want to renovate the third floor and be able to legally occupy that third floor, all they have to do is come into the city and apply for a permit and meet all codes that will not come in front of us, correct?
Pretty much. There are some of the third floors that do have their occupancy. There were a couple of permits that were issued in error early on. And then some of the units, they don't or aren't using the third floor. Some would like to be and are. So this would just take care of all of the outstanding issues. And the association has also been working in the individual units to bring up the fire code, to meet fire code for those third floors also, because it is different when you deal with occupied versus unoccupied space, so.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very, very much for all your work on this topic. Commissioners, questions for Ms. Garros? Commissioner Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Garros, I'm not sure I fully understand. Lot 5 is currently supposed to be a building, but there's nothing there right now.
That's correct.
And so we're saying that that's going to become common use, basic parking with landscaping and so forth, so that the increased usage by using the third floor has a place to put their cars.
Actually, for that lot 5, what we're doing is changing the PUD plans so that we're removing the office building as a use for that lot. And then the association wants it just to it'll become part of the common association property, just like the parking lot and the other common elements of the development are. And they will do that through condominium documents.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Levy, other questions?
That's it.
Commissioners, other questions for staff? Commissioner Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Garros, you're showing us here where the parking is. What happens, right now, the minimum parking is 187,
Yes.
and we are proposing 205. During winter, and the plowed snow, where would that be kept, or would it be transported out?
I believe that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the applicant is here, but I believe that either snow is removed or partially stored, kind of in that area of that south parking area, or lot 5, in through there. The reference to 205 parking stalls is the zoning ordinance maximum amount of parking stalls allowed. But they do have 193 stalls, which exceeds their required parking.
So even if they store the snow, the plowed snow in some corner there, they will still be okay with the,
Yes,
reach the minimum parking.
yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Singh, other questions?
No, sir.
Okay. With no other questions, commissioners, I did not ask, do any of you wish to speak to the applicant? Hearing none, this is a public hearing, and I will open the public hearing and ask anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item to please step up to the podium and give us your name and your address for the record. Sir, if you'd like to step up.
Sure, my
Thanks.
name is Doug Petrie at 2001 South Cross. And if you could put up that vertical print that you had earlier.
The aerial photo,
On
this one
lot
here?
5, 1659, are those buildings then? Do I understand that to be a building or not a building?
There
to
is,
be.
there is not a building there now.
No, I understand
Yeah.
now, no.
Correct.
But the intent of the PUD is yes, put one up?
Yes, there is approval where they could put a building up. Yes.
And the buildings would be,
They would look just like the other buildings at the 1713, 1613 buildings and along County Road 5 there.
I see.
But, sir, just to clarify, to make sure what you said, the current PUD does allow a building to be built, a fourplex, but what's in front of us this evening would actually remove the opportunity to build that building going forward. And then it would just be the remaining 4 fourplexes and the 1 duplex. Does that answer your question? And that space that's marked there,
Marked in red, you're
Yeah.
suggesting that it would not be built on,
and it would just be open, it would just be green space.
open green space. I misunderstood you totally.
Does
That
that,
would to be built on. The condos that you reference on the 3rd floor, they would be business condos, I assume?
Yeah, the underlying zoning of the property is B2, which is,
Yes.
yep, a neighborhood business. So yes, it would be town office, just like the first 2 floors are.
So there obviously is enough spaces for cars to accommodate all, oh, okay.
Yes.
That was all I had. Thank you very much.
sir, does that make sense? Since the building's being eliminated, that future building was taking up, in theory, X amount of parking spaces. And if they were gonna occupy the 3rd floor, then the development would not have enough parking. But now that that building, if this passed through the city council, is no longer gonna be built, then there's enough parking to accommodate pretty much the property as is, with some minor interior modifications. Because you said so you must live in the townhomes on South Cross?
I do.
Wanted to make sure I was
So
answering
the-
your questions.
So the question would be, is this intended to be, or to be sold then, once this happens?
The units, yes, they are condoed, so that is how, what has happened is as the buildings are occupied, I believe that then the association, once they're sold, brings those units into the association, and then they're part of the entire association. But the condominium units, the interior space, if you will, can be sold to different individuals.
Certainly. So there could be 3 floors of businesses in each condo,
Yes.
simply put.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your questions. Anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chair, I just have a quick question. Can we, if the applicant's willing to answer, and I don't know if this was addressed, but is the plan for that space just to leave it as greenfield, or were there plans for some type of bench seating with a fountain or any type of accoutrement?
The applicant had indicated they just wanted to become part of their overall common space. If they want to put in, a picnic table or something of that sort, they can certainly do that. They don't have plans, for instance, to expand that into additional parking lot or anything of that sort, but it would really be up to them how they want to utilize that.
Okay, I think it would be nice to have a little seating area there, but that's not my building, so thank you very much. That's my only question.
Commissioners, I think this is an excellent opportunity. This has been kind of a troubled property with some water issues and all of the legal stuff that's been going on, and this is a great step forward to kind of put all that behind them and allow the association to manage. So I certainly would be in favor of this if I had someone else that would be willing to make a motion. Commissioner Singh.
Now, before the motion, Mr. Chair, I would like to endorse what you have said. I noticed property, it has been ailing for a while. And I want to commend the association and staff for working together to bring it all together. This could be a viable small community there, and I think I wish the association well. As I said, I commend you for working so closely with staff to bring it together to this point. And so I will be supporting this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Commissioner Workman, Commissioner Levy has a question.
No question. I was gonna make the motion.
Okay, Commissioner Workman, you started.
All right. All right. It would be my honor to recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the PUD amendment subject to the following 2 conditions as listed by staff.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second? Second by Commissioner Levy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. That will go in front of the City Council on June 6th. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. That brings us to item number 5 this evening, which is also a public hearing. It's an application of the City of Burnsville to consider amendment to City Code Title 10 zoning, Chapters 30 signs related to monument signs in the Business Zoning District. Presenting this evening is Ms. Dean. Ms. Dean, we're excited to have you in front of us once again on this particular topic.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, Chair, members of the commission. This was a 2015 work plan item, and most recently, or following that, was addressed in January of 2017. Staff, myself, went over what the current sign code says for monument signs in business zoning districts, what market cities do, and it was really a check-in point to see if you wanted to move forward with potential ordinance changes. It came back in April with 9 different options, different scenarios on 10-acre plus parcels with multiple buildings, and then a under 10-acre parcel with 1 building, and played out different scenarios on how we could possibly add limits to monument signs, what different options might look like, and there was direction to move forward with a couple of those options, specifically to limit 2 monument signs for lots under 10 acres in business zoning districts, to allow up to 4 monument signs for lots over 10 acres, and then to place a requirement that freestanding signs, pylon, monument, freestanding signs, that they be at least 300 feet apart, no matter what size the property is. However, to exempt directional signs and menu boards from that requirement. And that if someone did want to have over 2 signs for a under 10-acre parcel, or over 4 signs for a over 10-acre parcel, that they would have to come in front of the Planning Commission for a specific review through a conditional use permit or planning and development process, depending on the situation. It was also noted that signs out there today are considered allowed, that they would be non-conforming, or they would be able to remain in place, that this would affect monument signs going forward. And so with that, within your packet and on the screen, I have the proposed red line changes to this section of the code, and then in draft ordinance format as well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Staff certainly does recommend approval of the ordinance as recommended by the Planning Commission, and we hope that this moves forward to City Council. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Ms. Dean, thank you very much. First of all, I want to start off with thank you for all your work. I know we started this in 2015, and so this is good to hopefully address this. Commissioner Levy, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Two parcels next to each other. Can they have monument signs, one on each side, that are closer than 300 feet?
If they're separate property owners, they're separate parcels, they would be treated by
Purely
this.
individually?
Purely individually
Okay.
by how the code is written.
Okay, thank you, that was it.
Commissioners, Commissioner Workman.
Just need one point of clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Dean and staff for everything here. I have a question, what would prompt ordinance enforcement if a scenario where a company leaves a building and they take their sign with them, that would then prompt this ordinance to kick in if a new sign was to go up?
If they removed the structure, if they completely removed the entire sign, then it would. If they kept the base and the form for the sign and just placed a new sign in there, no, this would not take effect.
Okay.
They would completely have to abandon it
So-
and remove it.
A business would have to, well, it wouldn't be up to the business to remove the monument sign, it'd be up to the property owner in that scenario.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Commissioners, other questions of staff? This is a public hearing. I would like to open the public hearing at this time and ask anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item to step up and give us your name and address for the record. Seeing no one, did you get the time recorded? Okay. I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chair, this is our recommendation, actually. We work with staff on several occasions and give direction to staff to come up with the proposal for us. And I, again, would like to join with you in commending staff for working so diligently to get it to us so early. So I intend to support it since it's our recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Commissioners, I would stand for a motion. Commissioner Levy, you have a question?
No, I have a
Oh,
motion
you'd
to
like
make.
Okay, yes.
I move that the planning commission recommend the approval of the proposed ordinance changes to the city council as presented.
Thank you. I have a motion on the floor with Commissioner Levy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Walter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. This brings us to item number 6. Item number 6 is also a public hearing. We had, this particular item was advertised, and staff is in the process of making some revisions to this, so it's not going to come in front of us this evening. However, the item was advertised, so I do need to open the public hearing this evening and see if anyone would like to address it. So the item is an application by the city of Burnsville to consider amending City Code Title 10, zoning, Chapter 7, general provisions, Chapter 12, R1, one family residential district, Chapter 18, R3D manufactured housing district to modify exterior compatibility standards. I did get through that. As I said, if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak to this item, I am going to open the public hearing. and invite anybody to the podium that would like to speak to this item. Once again, seeing no one, I am going to continue this public hearing to when staff brings it back to us. At this point, commissioners, do you have any questions of staff?
Mr. Chair, since it was posted for us to continue it, I think we need a
I would
motion.
need, that's where I was going next. If we don't have any questions, commissioners, I would need a motion to continue this.
So move.
Moved by Commissioner Levy,
Second.
second by Commissioner Workman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the item is continued until staff brings it back to us. Thank you. The last item on our agenda this evening is item number 7. This is also a public hearing. It's an application of the City of Burnsville to amend City Code Title 10, Zoning, Chapter 7, General Provision, Section 38, LP Gas Exchange Container Displays to modify the permit and performance standards. Ms. Garros,
Thank you.
probably the most exciting thing we've dealt with this evening.
I know that you're waiting on pins and needles. I
wondered what was so uncomfortable
Yes, actually, this item is before you. It's part of our cleanup, if you will, of the zoning provisions, kind of as they relate to our adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. And then also, in this case, we had a provision, it's kind of interesting. I don't know how long the LPE gas exchange container displays requirements have been in the ordinance. But I don't believe we actually had an application for a permit until last year, which kind of prompted that's interesting. Look at those requirements. Basically, what staff is recommending is to remove the permit requirements. What has happened over the years is that really for these container displays, and this is basically when you have your tank, you take off your barbecue and you bring it, to the hardware store or the gas station and want to exchange it for a new tank to bring back to your grill. That's what we're talking about here. And they are regulated by the fire code. So there really is not a need to have these permit standards any longer in the zoning ordinance because they're subject, as I said, to fire code and to fire department review. So really what we are requesting here is just to amend the ordinance to remove those permit. But also, we do want to keep some of the provisions. Number one, just identifying, in the ordinance that they are subject to fire code review. And then also some of the display standards still make sense because we really don't want these sitting out in a parking space, for example, or something of that sort. So really just retaining what's needed and proposing the ordinance be amended and really be updated based on current code. And those are, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. So I would just like to clarify, if a business would want to install an LP gas exchange display after this, if this ordinance is adopted, there would be no permitting process. They wouldn't have to, do they have to go to the fire department and get a permit? Or just of an inspection, they have certain regulations they would have to follow?
They're just regulations that they have to
Okay.
follow. So they would just really contact the fire department, talk to the fire marshal. He could give them the provisions. For the most part, the folks that do these know what the fire code is. But it's just a matter of, there really isn't a need for a permit like there may have been when this was first introduced into the ordinance. As I say, who knows how long ago.
Okay. Applicant would contact Assistant Chief Nelson and he would approve it.
Yes.
Correct, okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions of staff?
Yes, I just have one
Commissioner
question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deb, are there any standards? I guess my only thing is I wish I could have seen the fire code just to see how that's defined for these. I have no issue with any of this, but is there any wording in there as far as maintenance and visual appeal of those? Because I know sometimes those things can get pretty dilapidated and
There would be,
unsightly.
that would follow under just our general property maintenance, where we would be able to deal with that. I believe the fire code is similar to these in that it establishes setback distances, if you will. You can't be closer than X feet from an opening, like a window opening or door opening, for example. And there are a couple of other provisions like that, but there's not an extensive amount. But our property maintenance code now is pretty, it's pretty tight because it's the International Property Maintenance Code. So if we get ones, where paint is chipping off or they're rusted or something like that, we can deal with that through our property maintenance code.
Okay, that was my only real concern, because like you said, they can get rusted out and not very well maintained, and they can
Yes.
become more of an eyesore than anything. So if that's addressed in the IPMC, then I'm comfortable with what we're doing, so,
Okay.
thank you.
Commissioner Levy?
Considering that same question, how is the city informed that the maintenance is not being done? Is there a regular inspection cycle that takes place?
We have, through our enforcement program, there's active enforcement where we've got property maintenance staff that go and actually look at every property in the city once every 3 years. So, and then they are also driving around, and if somebody, sees something, they can address it at that time. But basically, every 3 years, every single property is inspected.
Thank you.
Or somebody could say something to the city and then they would go look
Yep.
into it.
Exactly.
Commissioner Levy, other questions?
That was it, thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, this is a public hearing, unless I have any other questions. Seeing none. This is a public hearing. At this point, I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anybody in the audience who would like to step up to the podium and give us their name and address for the record and speak to this item. They certainly could. Open the public hearing at 7:21. Gonna close the public hearing at 7:22. Commissioners, other questions, or I would entertain a motion for approval?
Commissioner Walters.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council that the proposed ordinance changes for the City of Burnsville to amend the City Code Title 10, Zoning, Chapter 7, General Provisions, Section 38, for LP gas exchange container displays to modify and permit the performance standards be approved. We recommend approval.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Singh, and I have a second by Commissioner Walter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
That brings us to item number 8 on our agenda this evening, which is updates. Commissioners, do you have any updates? Commissioner Workman's thinking really hard.
Nothing
No.
I want to share.
Nothing from the commissioners. I do know our next comp plan review is Monday, June 12th. Is that
The
correct?
next planning commission meeting is June 12th, and then the next comp plan advisory committee meeting is June 19th,
19th.
with the focus on natural environment and parks. And then Deb has the
We have
draft
the
agenda.
draft agenda for next week. Any other updates? At this point, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Workman, second by Commissioner Levy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. We are adjourned. Everyone have a safe drive home this evening. Thank you for coming.